The champagne glass shattered so loudly that the entire dining room went silent. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the pianist in the corner paused, his hands above the keys. The sound didn't belong in a place like this. Inside Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining rooms, nothing ever shattered. Not glasses, not reputations, and definitely not the carefully maintained calm of the wealthy people who filled the room every night. But tonight, something had cracked. Standing beside a table draped in white linen was a small girl, maybe 8 years old. Her dark hair was tied in a loose ponytail, slightly messy, like someone had rushed through it that morning. Her dress was simple, clean, but clearly not meant for places where people wore watches that cost more than houses. At her feet, the broken champagne glass glistened under the soft golden lights. Across from her stood Victoria Laurent. Victoria didn't move. She was known in financial magazines as the youngest woman to inherit the Laurent investment empire. Cold, brilliant, untouchable. Her family name appeared in headlines beside numbers most people couldn't imagine. Tonight she had been halfway through an important dinner, but now she just stared at the child. The girl's small hand trembled. Her eyes darted around the room, catching the sharp looks from well-dressed strangers. A waiter hurried over with a towel, whispering apologies as if the accident were somehow his fault. The girl whispered something, too quiet for anyone to hear. Then a chair scraped against the floor. A man stood up from the neighboring table. He wasn't dressed like the rest of the room either. No tailored suit, no luxury watch, just a clean navy shirt and worn jeans, early 30s, calm eyes. The kind of face that looked permanently tired but steady. He stepped forward and gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. The tension in the room shifted immediately. The girl looked up at him. "Dad." The word barely left her lips. The man looked directly at Victoria Laurent. His expression wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic either. It was calm. "She's with me," he said simply. 3 words. That was all. But something about the way he said them made the room even quieter. Victoria blinked slowly, studying him now instead of the broken glass. Most people around her rushed to explain themselves. They begged forgiveness, stumbled over words, tried to prove they belonged in her world. This man did none of that. He just stood there beside his daughter. Protective, steady, unbothered by the dozens of eyes watching him. Victoria glanced down at the girl again. The child looked embarrassed, but there was something else there too. Gratitude. Then the girl spoke. Voice small but clear. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to touch it." Victoria felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. No one ever apologized to her like that. Not sincerely. Not without wanting something in return. For a long moment, the billionaire heiress said nothing, and the entire room waited to see what she would do next. For a few seconds, no one in the dining room spoke. The waiter carefully knelt down, gathering the pieces of the shattered champagne glass. Other guests pretended to return to their conversations, but their eyes kept drifting back to the scene. Victoria Laurent was still looking at the girl. The child stood very still now, as if afraid even breathing too loudly might cause another problem. Her small fingers clutched the edge of her father's shirt. Victoria finally glanced down at the broken glass. Then she looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry, but it was calm enough that the whole room could hear it. The girl hesitated before answering. "Lily." Victoria nodded slightly. "Well, Lily, accidents happen." The tension in the room loosened a little. Lily blinked, surprised. Her father gave her shoulder a small, reassuring squeeze. "Say thank you," he said gently. "Thank you, ma'am," Lily replied quickly. Victoria waved her hand toward the waiter. "It's fine. Please clean it up." The waiter nodded gratefully and continued sweeping the pieces away. Victoria's attention returned to the man. "You're her father?" He nodded once. "Yes." Up close, she noticed the quiet exhaustion in his face, the kind that didn't come from late nights at luxury parties or stressful meetings. It looked like the kind people carried from working too much and sleeping too little. "Daniel Carter," he said, introducing himself without being asked. Victoria noticed he didn't offer his hand. He probably assumed she wouldn't shake it. Instead, she surprised him. She stood up slightly from her chair and reached out. Victoria Laurent. Daniel hesitated for half a second before shaking her hand. His grip was firm but respectful. Meanwhile, Lily stared at the enormous dining room around her. The sparkling chandeliers, the quiet conversations, the plates that probably cost more than her entire outfit. She tugged lightly on her father's sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "are we in trouble?" Daniel crouched down to her level. "No," he said softly. "Everything's okay." Victoria watched the interaction closely. Something about the way he spoke to his daughter felt different, patient, careful, as if he measured every word so she would feel safe. Victoria suddenly realized something else. People in this room spoke to their children through nannies, assistants, or quick distracted sentences between phone calls. But this man? He gave the girl his full attention. Victoria crossed her arms thoughtfully. "Daniel," she said after a moment, "this isn't exactly a place children usually wander into." Daniel stood again. "I know," he replied calmly. There was a pause. Then Lily quietly spoke up. "We came to say thank you." Victoria frowned slightly. "To say thank you?" she repeated. Lily nodded, and suddenly the room's attention returned once again, because whatever was about to be said next clearly mattered. Before we continue the story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if you ever loved someone with your pure heart, so subscribe to this channel so you never miss the best stories. The words hung in the air. "We came to say thank you." For a moment, Victoria Laurent didn't understand. "Thank me for what?" she asked. Lily looked up at her father as if asking for permission. Daniel gave a small nod. The girl took a quiet breath. "A few months ago, you helped my dad." Victoria frowned slightly. Her mind quickly ran through dozens of business deals, meetings, charity events, and investments. Nothing connected. "I meet a lot of people," she said honestly. "I'm afraid I don't remember." Daniel didn't look offended. He seemed to expect that answer. "You probably wouldn't," he said calmly. "It wasn't personal." Victoria tilted her head slightly. "Then explain." Daniel placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder again. "Last winter," he began, "your foundation funded a small emergency grant program for families who were about to lose their homes." Victoria's expression shifted. She remembered approving the program through the Laurent Foundation during a late-night meeting with her legal team. At the time, it had been just another financial decision among hundreds. Numbers, reports, signatures, nothing emotional. Daniel continued. "My wife passed away 2 years ago," he said quietly. "Cancer." The dining room around them seemed to fade into the background. "I've been raising Lily alone since then," he added. Lily looked down at the floor, listening quietly. Daniel continued speaking with steady calm. "I work construction. Winter months are tough. Jobs slow down." He paused briefly. "Last year, things got worse. Medical bills for my wife's treatment were still piling up." Victoria listened more carefully now. "Our landlord gave us a final notice," Daniel said. 30 days. Lily's fingers tightened slightly around his shirt. Daniel glanced down at her before continuing. "I applied for that grant your foundation offered. Honestly, I didn't think anyone would even read it." Victoria remembered the stack of applications she had approved in bulk. Her team had handled most of the decisions. "And?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked directly at her. "We got it." Lily's eyes brightened. "It paid the rent," she said quickly. Daniel nodded. "It bought us time. Enough for me to pick up more work, get back on my feet." Victoria stayed silent. In her world, millions of dollars moved every day. But here was a man standing in front of her, saying that a small grant, something she had barely thought about, had kept a roof over his daughter's head. Lily stepped forward slightly. "I wanted to say thank you in person," she said. Her voice was soft but sincere. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. Not pride, something heavier. because for the first time she was looking at the real faces behind the numbers she approved. And suddenly, that broken champagne glass felt like the smallest thing that had happened tonight. For a long moment, Victoria Laurent didn't say anything. She simply looked at Lily. The girl stood there nervously, her hands clasped together, waiting for a response that probably meant a lot more to her than anyone else in the room realized. Victoria slowly sat back down in her chair. "I see," she said quietly. Across the dining room, the low murmur of conversation slowly returned. People were pretending not to watch anymore, but their curiosity was obvious. Victoria turned to Daniel. "You came all the way here, just to say thank you." Daniel nodded. "Yes." Victoria studied him carefully. Most people who approached her wanted something, a business favor, a connection, an opportunity. Even gratitude from wealthy donors often came with hidden expectations. But Daniel's posture was relaxed. He didn't look like someone asking for anything. He looked like someone finishing a responsibility. "We didn't know how else to reach you," Daniel added calmly. "The foundation office told us you sometimes have dinner here." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "So, you brought your daughter to one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan, hoping to find me?" Daniel allowed a small smile. "Not exactly the most practical plan." Lily looked up at him. "But it worked," she whispered. Daniel chuckled quietly. Victoria noticed something unusual about the moment. She wasn't annoyed. In fact, she was strangely curious. She looked at Lily again. "What grade are you in?" "Third," Lily answered quickly. "And you wanted to come here tonight?" Lily nodded. "I wanted to say thank you before Dad said maybe it would be too weird." Victoria glanced at Daniel. "You thought it would be weird? I thought security would throw us out before we even got inside," he admitted. That earned a faint smile from Victoria. "Normally they might have." Lily suddenly reached into the small bag hanging from her shoulder. Daniel looked confused. "What are you doing?" he asked. Lily carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was slightly wrinkled, like it had been carried around for a while. She held it toward Victoria. "I made this." Victoria hesitated before taking it. She unfolded the paper slowly. Inside was a drawing. A simple crayon picture of a small house, a tall man, and a little girl holding hands. Above them, written in uneven letters, were the words, "Thank you for helping my dad keep our home." Victoria stared at the drawing longer than she expected. Something tightened in her throat. For years she had signed checks worth millions, yet no one had ever handed her something that felt this personal. Lily watched her nervously. "Do you like it?" she asked softly. Victoria folded the paper carefully. "Yes," she said after a moment. Her voice was quieter now. "I do." And for the first time that evening, the billionaire heiress felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Humbled. For the first time that evening, Victoria Laurent forgot about the business dinner she had been hosting. The executives sitting at the other side of the table had stopped pretending to focus on their menus. They were clearly listening now. But Victoria didn't seem to notice them anymore. Her attention remained on Lily. She looked again at the drawing in her hands before folding it neatly and placing it beside her plate. "You carried this all the way here?" she asked. Lily nodded. "I didn't want it to get bent." Victoria let out a small breath, almost like a quiet laugh. "That explains why it's only slightly bent." Daniel watched the exchange silently. He looked relieved that the situation had softened, but he still seemed careful not to intrude. Victoria glanced toward the empty chair across from her. "Have you two eaten?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "We were planning to grab something on the way home." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You came to one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan without planning to eat here." Daniel shrugged slightly. "Didn't think that would go over well." Lily leaned closer to him. "I told you maybe we could share fries," she whispered. Victoria heard it. A faint smile appeared on her face before she even realized it. She turned to the nearby waiter. "Could we add 2 more seats to this table?" The waiter blinked in surprise. Of course, Ms. Laurent. Daniel immediately shook his head. That's not necessary. Victoria looked directly at him. I know. Her tone was calm but firm. But I'd like you to stay. Daniel hesitated. He clearly wasn't comfortable accepting favors, especially in a room filled with people far wealthier than him. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. Dad. Daniel looked down at her. Her eyes were hopeful. He sighed quietly. All right, he said. The waiter quickly arranged 2 additional chairs. Lily climbed onto the seat carefully, her eyes wide as she looked at the elegant plates and silverware around her. Wow, she whispered. Victoria noticed how carefully the girl held her hands in her lap, afraid to touch anything. Relax, Victoria said gently. Lily looked at her. You're not in trouble here. That seemed to help. Daniel sat across from Victoria, still slightly uncomfortable. You didn't have to do this, he said. Victoria rested her arms lightly on the table. I know, she replied. There was a small pause. Then she added something that even surprised herself. But I'd like to hear more about how that grant helped you. Daniel studied her expression. For the first time, he didn't see the distant billionaire from magazine covers. He saw someone genuinely curious. Lily, meanwhile, leaned closer to the table and whispered excitedly, Dad, do you think they have fries? Victoria couldn't help it. She laughed. The waiter returned with menus, placing one carefully in front of Lily. The girl stared at it like it was a puzzle. There are a lot of words, she whispered. Victoria Laurent leaned slightly toward her. What are you hoping to find? She asked. Lily looked up hopefully. Fries? Victoria glanced at the waiter. Can the kitchen make fries? The waiter smiled politely. Of course. Lily's face lit up instantly. Really? Victoria nodded. Really? Daniel shook his head with a quiet chuckle. She's been talking about fries since we left home. Lily grinned proudly. They're the best food. Victoria folded her hands on the table. You might be right, she admitted. For a moment, the tension that had filled the dining room earlier completely disappeared. Daniel relaxed a little in his chair. You didn't have to invite us, he said again. Victoria looked at him. You didn't have to come all this way just to say thank you. Daniel thought about that. Lily insisted, he said. Victoria glanced at the girl. Why was it so important? Lily shrugged like it was obvious. Because you helped us. Victoria leaned back slightly. That was the foundation. But you're the boss of it, Lily replied. Simply, the answer was so direct that Victoria didn't respond right away. Daniel noticed her silence. That grant changed things for us, he explained. It gave me enough time to find steady work again. We didn't have to move. Lily could stay in her school. Victoria nodded slowly. In her world, people talked about investments in terms of millions, returns, and percentages. But Daniel was talking about time to rebuild a life. Lily suddenly looked around the restaurant again. Are you here every night? She asked Victoria. Not every night, Victoria replied. Do you live nearby? Not far. Lily leaned forward. Do you get fries whenever you want? Daniel sighed. Lily. But Victoria raised a hand slightly. It's okay. She looked at the girl. Sometimes, she admitted. Lily looked impressed. That's amazing. Daniel rubbed his forehead with a small smile. Sorry about the questions. Victoria shook her head. I don't get honest questions very often. The waiter soon returned with a plate of fries. Lily stared at them like they were treasure. Thank you, she said quickly. Victoria watched the girl take the first bite. There was something strangely peaceful about the moment. Then Lily spoke again between bites. My dad works really hard. Daniel looked embarrassed. Lily, but she kept going. He wakes up early every day, even when he's really tired. Victoria's eyes moved to Daniel. For the first time, she saw something she hadn't noticed earlier. Not just exhaustion, determination. And suddenly, the billionaire heiress realized something unexpected. This quiet dinner might be the most honest conversation she'd had in years. Lily finished half the plate of fries before she even realized how quiet the table had become. She looked up. Both Victoria Laurent and Daniel were watching her with small smiles. "What?" she asked, suddenly shy. "Nothing," Daniel said softly. "Just enjoy your food." Victoria leaned back slightly in her chair, observing the moment. For years, most of her dinners in Manhattan had followed the same pattern: formal conversations, business negotiations, people carefully choosing their words. But tonight felt completely different. There were no hidden motives here, just a tired father and a grateful child. Lily wiped her fingers with the napkin, trying to look polite. Then she looked at Victoria again. "Do you help a lot of families?" she asked. Victoria thought about the question. "The Laurent Foundation helps many people," she answered. "But do you meet them?" Lily asked. Victoria paused. "Not usually." Lily frowned slightly, thinking about that. "You should," she said. Daniel sighed again. "Lily, you don't have to give advice to—" "It's okay," Victoria interrupted gently. She actually looked interested. "Why do you think I should meet them?" Lily shrugged. "Because then you'd see what happens." Victoria folded her hands together. "And what happens?" Lily pointed lightly toward her father. "This?" Daniel looked embarrassed, but he didn't interrupt. "He was really sad when Mom got sick," Lily continued quietly. "And when the bills kept coming—" Victoria listened carefully. "But when we got the letter about the help," Lily smiled a little, "Dad cried." Daniel cleared his throat. "Okay, that's enough." "But they were happy tears," Lily insisted. Victoria looked at Daniel. "You cried?" Daniel gave a small, honest shrug. "I was exhausted," he admitted. "And relieved." Victoria nodded slowly. The girl's words settled deeper than any presentation or financial report she had ever heard. Lily leaned back in her chair after finishing the last fry. "Thank you for helping my dad not be sad anymore." The sincerity in her voice was impossible to ignore. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest again. She had spent most of her life managing wealth, building influence, protecting her family's empire. But this small conversation was showing her something she rarely saw: the actual impact, real people, real relief. Daniel glanced at the time and sighed. "We should probably get going," he said. Lily looked disappointed. "But I didn't say thank you properly yet." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You already did." Lily shook her head. "No, I mean a big thank you." Victoria was curious now. "What does a big thank you look like?" Lily smiled. And what she did next made the entire table pause. Lily slid off her chair. For a second, Victoria Laurent thought the girl might simply wave goodbye. Instead, Lily walked around the table. Daniel noticed immediately. "Lily," he said quietly, unsure what she was about to do. But the girl had already reached Victoria's side. She looked up at her with the kind of courage only children have, the kind that doesn't overthink social rules or status. Then she wrapped her small arms around Victoria and gave her a quick hug. The table went completely still. Victoria froze. No one hugged her. Not business partners. Not investors. Not the people who constantly surrounded her in Manhattan's high society. Affection was something her world replaced with handshakes and contracts. But Lily held her for a brief second and then stepped back. "That's the big thank you," she said proudly. Daniel looked mortified. "I'm so sorry." But Victoria raised her hand gently. "It's okay." Her voice sounded different now, softer. She looked down at the girl. "Thank you, Lily." Daniel stood up and reached for his jacket. "We should really go. It's getting late." Lily nodded and grabbed her small bag again. Before leaving, Daniel turned to Victoria. "I appreciate your time tonight," he said sincerely. "And everything your foundation did for us." Victoria looked at him carefully. "Daniel." He paused. "If you ever need anything again," she said, "you can contact the Laurent Foundation directly. I'll make sure they know your name." Daniel nodded, grateful but composed. "I hope we won't need to." Victoria smiled slightly. I hope so too. Lily waved enthusiastically. Bye, Victoria. Goodbye, Lily. Daniel and his daughter walked toward the exit together. Lily was talking excitedly again, probably about the fries, the fancy restaurant, and the unbelievable night. Victoria remained seated for a moment after they left. Her business guests watched her quietly. Finally, she picked up the small folded drawing Lily had given her, the little crayon house, the father, the daughter, and the uneven words written above them. Thank you for helping my dad keep our home. Victoria stared at it for a long moment. Then she carefully placed the drawing into her purse, because suddenly it felt more valuable than anything else she had carried that night. This story reminds us that true wealth is not measured by money, power, or status, but by the positive impact we have on other people's lives. Sometimes a decision that feels small to us can completely change someone else's world. From this story, we learn that kindness creates invisible ripples. A parent's love and sacrifice are powerful beyond words. Gratitude, even from a child, can soften the hardest hearts. And most importantly, the greatest legacy we can leave behind is not what we own, but the lives we quietly help rebuild.